Hey, free people, it is day 9 of our 21 days of prayer and fasting, and I hope that the sting of maybe yesterday's sandpaper devotion has maybe worn off a little bit, but I also hope you know how much I love you. Do you know that? Do you know that I love you? Do you know that I want the best for you? I want to see you walk in freedom and purpose, especially the purpose that God has designed for you to walk in this life, because we only get one life to live. I'm here to be one of those encouraging and sometimes challenging voices in your life to keep spurring you on to good works and to following after Jesus. I want to be one of those voices in your ear that keeps telling you to keep going, keep pursuing Christ. So keep that in mind as we talk about Courage Part 2 today. This is the Year of Courage Part 2. And at this point, we've already established that in order to deal with sin and woundedness, it takes courage. In fact, I believe it actually takes more courage to pursue healing than it does to just cover it up. It takes more boldness and love for God to pursue righteousness than it does to just remain in our old ways and old sin. So let's dive in a little bit more about what this refinement process looks like. Jesus gives us a great description of this in the Gospel of John. So we're going to read from John 15. We're going to read verses 1 through 2, and then we're going to skip down to verses 5 and 6. I am the true grapevine, and my Father is the gardener. He cuts off every branch of mine that doesn't produce fruit, and he prunes the branches that do bear fruit so they will produce even more. Verse 5. Yes, I am the vine, you are the branches. Those who remain in me and I in them will produce much fruit. For apart from me, you can do nothing. Anyone who does not remain in me is thrown away like a useless branch and withers. Such branches are gathered into a pile to be burned. For the sake of time, I wanted to focus on these 4 verses, but that entire passage just has so much in it. But here Jesus is talking about 2 age-old gardening principles. He's talking about the removal of dead branches and pruning. In a nutshell, Jesus is saying that those who are only appearing to follow Christ, who are not actual true believers, they will not produce fruit. This is harmful to the vine as a whole to keep them intact. So God the Father removes those branches. But those who are truly following Jesus, who are actual believers, who've given their heart to him, they will produce fruit. That's what Jesus is saying here. You actually have no choice but to produce fruit if you're following Jesus. But in order to do that, it requires pruning, because from time to time, a few dead grapes may want to try to pop up, and they will. So it's necessary for that to be removed so that it doesn't infect the entire branch. Think of those dead grapes as sin and maybe even your wounds, your deep soul wounds. And you might be thinking, what are a few dead grapes going to hurt if I'm producing fruit at the same time? Jesus is saying that pruning is necessary so that you can produce even more fruit. Basically, Jesus isn't content with the good enough approach. Because if we take the good enough approach, we're not giving Jesus the opportunity to take us and mold us to be more like him. And that's what he desires. That is his purpose for us, to be made more like him. And sin and woundedness stunts our growth. This whole talk about pruning and cutting off branches reminds me of a time when my husband and I first moved into a new to us house. And I was so excited about the rose bushes that we had. Now, I did not have a green thumb whatsoever, and I was very much a novice when it came to gardening. But the roses were beautiful. I loved them, and I couldn't wait to see how they would grow and mature through our years living there. Imagine my horror at the end of our first fall there when I walk outside after my husband had done some yard work, and I see that he has cut the rose bushes off at the ground. I was so confused at why he would do such a thing, because he knew how much I loved them. In my mind, he had just killed them. Now, here's something you need to know about my husband. He is a jack of all trades, and he knows everything about everything. So when he explained to me that they would grow back fuller and more healthy the next year, I had a hard time believing him. Now, I shouldn't have been surprised the next spring when everything he said actually happened. The bushes were taller, there were more rosebuds and more flowers, and over the years they grew and matured that they even changed colors. Now, I'm not necessarily claiming to understand the entirety of the process of pruning and cutting off branches, but I am willing to testify that this is a kingdom principle and we should buy into it if we want to bear good fruit for Jesus. Now, here's my question for you today. Do you have the courage to allow the true gardener, God the Father to come in and prune areas of your heart that need to be taken out so that you can bear more fruit and walk in freedom. What area of your life do you need to allow him to move in and begin pruning so that you can grow and mature in your relationship with him? I truly believe that during this time of prayer and fasting is the best time to start because our focus is on him and not on ourselves. So what a great time to allow God the Father to come in and prune our hearts, to take out the dead grapes of sin and woundedness so that we can be made more like him. After all, there is no time like the present, is there? God bless you, and I'll see you tomorrow.